Yes. All right. So the recording is started. Again, thank you everybody for being here. I am Justin Hopper. I'm the chief for CDFA's Office of Civil Rights. I am also the chair for the Disability Advisory Committee for the Department of Food and Agriculture. And so we are very excited to have Stop Stigma Sacramento here to talk about the stigmas associated with mental health and to kind of round out Mental Health Awareness Month. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marielle Von Hickman to introduce her folks and get our presentation started. So Marielle, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Justin. My name is Marielle Von Hickman. I'm a senior mental health counselor with Sacramento County, and I'm here with my colleague, Amelia Storm. It's no longer Storm, actually. She just returned from her wedding and honeymoon. So what's your new last name, Amelia?
Amelia Baines, Baynes. I will update that. Thank you.
Congratulations. Glad to have you back. This is her first speaking event back. So glad to have you here with us. So we are Stop Stigma Sacramento, like I mentioned. The project is part of the Mental Illness Isn't Always What You Think project. It's been around for a little over 12 years. Developed because stigma is one of the largest obstacles to people getting the help that they need. So we're always here loving to share about the project. The heart of our project are community members, Sacramento County residents who are willing to share their own personal lived experience stories with the hopes of others being able to get the help that they need. Everyone doesn't know this yet, and we keep trying to encourage people to get out, learn more, but that mental health impacts everyone. It impacts your passions, your work life, your relationships. We invest a great deal of our time addressing our physical health, our nutrition. I know I learned about nutrition. I couldn't even tell you when I started learning about nutrition and physical health. We all did. We all started learning from the time we were, really, really small. But it wasn't the same. It's not the same story for mental health. And when there's an issue or an illness, most people know that it impacts you physically, and they turn and they go to the doctor, they go to someone and, get help for that. But it isn't the same with mental health. And we want to encourage people that when they are sensing something is going on with their mental health, that they would seek help, talk to someone, the same way that they do for a physical illness or medical condition. Mental illness is a medical condition. And a lot of people like to say there are people that still debate whether it is or not, but mental illness is a medical condition. As a community, our role really is to embrace open communication about our mental health, about the challenges. We really want to provide education and direction to other people before a crisis occurs. Our project is part of our funding is through the Mental Health Services Act, and specifically prevention. Mental health in some ways can be preventable if we are talking about lifestyle, if we're talking about how we take care of our mental health, how we manage stress. Stress can develop into a mental illness if it is not addressed. So the project is a reminder that there is no shame. We don't want there to be any shame or stigma associated with mental illness. We just want our Sacramento community really to thrive and be successful as a whole. So our focus of today is we're going to do just a brief overview of the project, and then you're actually going to hear from our speakers who share their lived experience. As I mentioned previously, our goal is to reduce the stigma and the discrimination associated with mental illness, but it's also really to promote mental health. and wellness. And we want to encourage and inspire those people that are living with mental illness, or have family members that are living with mental illness. In Sacramento County alone, there's over 300,000 people that are living with a mental illness. I mean, that is a lot of people, and only 1/3 of people are actually seeking help. As I mentioned previously about the Mental Health Services Act, what's important here is that since its enactment in 2005, that it has brought in over $12 billion statewide for services. I mean, and that's huge, 12 billion towards those that, like I said, that 1/3 of people that are actually seeking help, seeking services, utilizing the prevention agencies out there that are promoting mental health and wellness. One in 5 adults are living with a mental illness. We actually think that's probably higher due to the stigma that people aren't willing to share that they or someone they know are living with a mental illness. 1 in 6 youth will experience a mental health challenge in their lifetime. A lot of people also aren't aware that 50% of mental illnesses begin by the age of 14. So right around that time, you're a teenager, all kinds of things are occurring, but sometimes it just gets dismissed and written off as being teenage behavior. So if you're noticing changes in, teenagers that you have in your life, to really pay attention. Worst case scenario, and best case scenario is just to get those things checked out. 75% of mental illnesses begin by the age of 24. And most people live with the symptoms for 10 years before they actually get help. So again, when we go back to thinking about this being a medical condition, are there any other medical conditions that you can think of where people just ignore it, or try to cope with it on their own for 10 years? So if you're having trouble breathing, if you think that you're a diabetic, if you're having cardiovascular symptoms. I grew up with migraines, and I can't imagine just ignoring my migraines for those 10 years. So the same thing with mental illness. We want people, it may not be an illness, it may not be an actual diagnosable disorder, but you may have the symptoms, and just to go and get help with treatment. So that might be counseling, it might be medication. People do see usually a 70 to 90 and sometimes 100% decrease in the symptoms by going to get those addressed. The downside to not getting your mental illness addressed is that it does impact your physical health and can actually reduce your lifetime, your lifespan by up to 25 years if you just continue to ignore it. Oops, sorry about that. Mental illness doesn't discriminate. It does not care one iota who you are. Doesn't care what you look like, where you live, how much money you have. Doesn't care your race, your social class, your gender, your religion. And then all that being said, it isn't anyone's fault. It could be due to a genetic disposition, could be due to trauma, lifestyle, ongoing stress, like I mentioned, issues like social isolation, domestic violence, relationships breaking down, experiencing racism, bereavement, grief, finances. All of those things can actually lead to problems that can impact your mental health. So stigma is that disgrace. It's that negative attitudes that others have towards someone that is living with a mental illness. It's that judgment that comes up when you start to talk about mental illness, or someone starts to describe, what their personal experience is, and we on the receiving end hear that and judge them negatively. Our attitudes are what prevent people from either sharing it further or actually going out and getting the help. You can also have your own personal self-stigma. certain cultures and communities and have a lot of judgment around what should be for a person. So, men shouldn't experience depression. Men don't get depressed, just man up. People that are, maybe experiencing a lot of anxiety, you're just tired, just go rest, so like minimizing and dismissing what people are trying to share with you. We want to get away from doing that. It really is up to us to change the stigma, not the person that's living with the stigma, on the receiving end of the stigma. And we do that by what you're doing here today, getting educated about mental health, mental illness and mental health, and not believing the myths and the lies that are told. It could be, again, shared within your family, within your personal lived community, media, movies, a lot of myths and lies in media and movies about what mental illness is. And then also we want to have people get the help that they need and encourage others to get the help that they need. For those that have lived experience related to the topics we're going to be sharing here in a few minutes, we know that it can be difficult to hear some of the topics. If you need to sign off, please do so, or reach out to Jessica or Justin if you need additional support through your agency. That brings us to our Speakers Bureau, which is really the heart of our project. So we have 2, possibly 3 speakers. I think the third might have trouble signing on, but who are going to share their personal lived experiences, and they will take a few questions if you have any following. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Abby, who's going to share her story.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Abby, and I like to tell, I sometimes tell people that if I love you, I will imagine you dead, which is not something you can put on your dating profile. It's a little off-putting. Um, so before it becomes even more off-putting, let me explain. I have OCD, and as far as I can tell, I've had it since I was 10 years old, although I didn't know it was OCD then. There was a large earthquake, the first one that I had experienced, and it was scary to me. As a child, it wasn't just the experience of the earthquake itself that was scary, but it was also the news. We love the news, right? It wasn't as intense as it was today, but there was constantly talking about, or constantly showing images of collapsed freeways, collapsed buildings, and then they kept talking about the death toll. And for child Abby, that was the first time that I had realized that people I love can be ripped from the world in this terrifying way. And so that's when I believe I started having the intrusive thoughts, which are the obsessions, and mine revolved around everyone I love, essentially dying in some terrible way. And the rituals or the compulsions were, for me, they all took place in my head. So they were kind of hidden in plain sight. Um, and it started out with like little words and phrases, and as a child I would say, please don't let there be an earthquake, things like that. And OCD, because it's not logical, makes the person who has it feel like it's their fault. So as a kid, not only was I worried about people I love dying, but I thought that all of these things were my fault. So I had a bit of a burden to deal with. And I was also a parent. As I got older, the intrusive thoughts and the rituals changed a bit. It was not only about earthquakes, but it was about any kinds of terrible ways to die, which is, my brain is a party, by the way. It's wonderful. terrible diseases, car crashes, plane crashes, any of those things would be the content of my intrusive thoughts. And I believed that they were all my fault. So I turned into a supervillain, which is not as cool as it seems in the movies, I guess. But um, I at around this time, I was a teenager, then the internet became more popular, it became a thing. It was the very early times, dial-up noises, AOL, Prodigy, all that stuff. So I did what you're not supposed to do, which is whatever the original WebMD was, I looked up my symptoms and realized that I probably have OCD. Um, But I didn't tell anybody because, again, I was frightened and I couldn't imagine telling somebody I love, hey, so I think about your death a lot. It's not really a casual conversation piece there. And besides that, I thought that I was doing okay. I mean, I went on to graduate high school. I went to college. I graduated from college. And then I went out into the workplace and got a whole bunch of fabulously boring jobs. And so I thought I was doing okay. Um, and also my intrusive thought, even I should probably mention that my rituals weren't just words and phrases anymore, like don't let this happen. It was this sort of perfectly illogical OCD talking where, let's say, the intrusive thought is about family members dying in a car accident. Well, in order not to make that happen, I would then imagine each and every family member dying in a crash, like one after the other, because nothing ever turns out the way you imagine. So I was carrying all of that around, still thought I was doing okay. I was working, had my life was kind of going. Uh, and then this is about a couple decades even after I believe that I first started having symptoms. I say that my OCD came true. And that is when a friend I had known for since I was 11 years old, he did die in a car accident. And I know that rituals wouldn't have brought him back or wouldn't have saved him, but still OCD is illogical. And my my anxiety went into overdrive. I was anxious all the time, scared all the time. I started looking at traffic reports every day when my sister went to work to make sure that there were no car accidents. I would call my parents up every single night to make sure that they were still alive. Um, and with all of the stress and anxiety, finally my body was like, nope, you're not doing well. And I got this really bad flu, really bad dehydration that I wound up in the emergency room. And finally I got to the point where I was able to I called up my mom one night and I said, I can't do this anymore. I think I have OCD and I need to get help. And she was really supportive. And that was what I needed, was somebody who would listen. And ultimately I found a psychiatrist. I was very lucky to be able to find one. And I described my symptoms to him, and that was very scary because I had never said out loud any of the things I was carrying in my mind. And he said, yep, you have OCD, which, my Google search was correct. And then one of the things that I remember the most that he said to me was, you've been dealing with this or coping with this for more than, for 20 years. And I said, yes. And he said to me, I want you to do so much more than cope. And that's one of the reasons why I speak, is so that people know that help is available and you can manage your disorder and you can thrive, as I am trying to do every day. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby. So that they get the real picture. This wasn't the occasional thought that popped into your head, maybe on Monday, then again on Thursday. Then let me see, you were having a good weekend, so then it didn't happen again until Monday. Tell us kind of how many thoughts are we talking about? What are we?
Oh, wow. I mean, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that thousands a day, just it's a constant bombardment of these intrusive thoughts.
So it makes me think about a couple of people that do, I guess we would say, like, it would be odd, right? I think when I hear some of the things that they do, which is normal behavior, it might be a phone call. And I didn't even think about it until you just mentioned it. But this person calls obsessively until we pick up. And I'm just wondering, after hearing what you're sharing, and it is a safety thing for her. She's older, but I'm wondering if on the other end, it's this uncontrollable thing that she can't, because that's what it is. I mean, you can't put a stop to it. You couldn't put a stop to it. So what is life like for you now? You went through, you were just coping for decades, and then how do you treat OCD?
So, in my case, I started out with medication at the time, and I did go to therapy, just regular talk therapy for the trauma of losing my friend. But eventually, I started doing exposures, which is essentially there's a sort of hierarchy of um, your intrusive thoughts, like from least scary to most, and you start with the least, and you sort of come up with a situation, an imaginary situation in which you expose yourself to the things that you fear, and the goal is to not respond through ritual, which is frightening, because nobody wants to be scared, especially not deliberately. But ultimately, you become accustomed to facing that fear, enduring that discomfort, and it no longer, whatever the intrusive thought is, it doesn't have that kind of power over you anymore.
Thank you. What do you say to someone who might be on the call and is possibly living with OCD? And also, what is the best support? You said that your mom, when you were finally able to share it with your mom, that was wonderful for you to have her support and listen. So what does the support look like for you now? And what do you say to the person on the call who might be living with OCD or know someone living with OCD?
So support for me, and it may look different for some, but I always talk about listening without judgment. I think that that is so important. I know that when we talk to somebody, we like to sort of solve problems sometimes, and sometimes that's not what we need. And if your people, whoever it is that you talk to, your group, your community, your family, partners, you can tell them, if you're comfortable, what you need. And for me, I say, I just want you to listen, and they'll do that. Um, as far as somebody who thinks that they may have OCD or may know somebody who they might, um, I would definitely say it can seem overwhelming, and it is scary. I mean, the truth of it is scary, and it is uncomfortable. But there and you might think of yourself in these ways, like, what's going on with my brain? I have such a weird brain, and then we self-stigmatize. But most people have intrusive thoughts. People with OCD just attach value to the thoughts and believe in uh, their worth, like they're true, they're so true. But ultimately, you can get to a point where you say, you know what, they're just thoughts. They're not a reflection of who I am. They're just thoughts, and you can manage them. Treatment is available, and all kinds of information is available about OCD that has certainly helped me.
Thank you so much, Abby. We'll come back to questions after you and Laura shares. Thank you. So next up, we're going to have, if you have questions for Abby, you can also put them in the chat and she's free to respond there, or comments for Abby. Next up, we have Laura, who's going to share her story.
Thank you. Am I still on mute? No. Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. Well, like Marty said, mental illness is not always what you think. And I'm going to share a small part of my life story, and I really hope it'll bring a new perspective on mental health and mental illness by the time I'm done. I usually like to ask a question, but I see that, well, maybe you can use the raised hand feature if you're on this call. I have a question. Can someone who struggles with self-abuse, hears voices, has major depression, insomnia, and is on multiple medications really able to be productive in society? If you think they can, raise your hand. I see a few hands going up. Yeah, great, great. Thank you very much. You're all those that raise their hand, you're right. It is possible, and I'm living proof of that. I'm going to share some of my issues, and I dare you to say that I don't live with mental illness, or if I have a mental illness, I don't succeed in life. I do function in society. I work full time. I find enjoyment in photography, my friends, and serving others. And I do have a mental illness. And again, mental illness is not always what you think. I wish I could tell you that my life was the American dream, but it wasn't. Unfortunately, I had ECT, or electroconvulsive therapy, for 5 years on a regular basis, and it damaged both my long-term and short-term memory. ECT is a procedure in which electrical currents are passed through the brain, triggering a brief seizure. And ECT can affect memory in many, many ways. For example, you may have trouble remembering events that occurred before the treatment, called retrograde amnesia. Well, for me, I only have a few childhood memories, a few high school memories, and I rely on my friends to tell me what my life is like and my past life was like. So again, I just want to emphasize that mental illness is not always what you think. Not all mentally ill people walk around aimlessly talking to themselves and screaming obscenities at everyone who crosses their path. Those people need help too for their severe mental illness, but they're not the majority. As Mari mentioned, 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health disorder in a given year, and approximately 1 in 3 experience anxiety. How many of you were perfectionists growing up? I know I was. It doesn't make you mentally ill, so you can raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you. I see some hands going up there. I was a perfectionist. I got the good grades, never got sent to the office, and I was always the best player on the sport that I was playing at the time. And if I wasn't the best player, I simply didn't play the sport. And in high school, I received the highest honors in athletics and earned the most outstanding athlete award. I was on top of the world in high school and thought I'd never fall off, but then it happened. Just after high school, I was sexually assaulted. I was 18 years old, but I was still kind of a child on the inside. After the assault, I blamed myself and was actually embarrassed. And I went to bed that night and acted as though nothing had happened. I think if I had a little support and could have trusted someone, I would have found help for the post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, I was suffering. I denied anything was wrong with me, and PTSD is a type of anxiety disorder. It occurs after you've seen or experienced a traumatic event that involves the threat of injury or death. I never thought I had a mental illness. After all, I still had a sense of humor. I had 2 part-time jobs and I was attending college. And happily, I got married. But right after my marriage, I developed anorexia nervosa and was hospitalized for 6 months. My husband left me at that time, saying if I knew she were crazy, I never would have married her. And that was the last time I saw him. I never saw him again. And I always wanted to tell him that mental illness is not always what you think. I became frustrated and angry over everything that was happening in my life. And I became a cutter. And a cutter is someone who practices self-injury by cutting or burning their skin. And being a cutter was a learned behavior for me. But it became an addiction. And this addiction started off with a few stitches here and there and led to large burns, landing me in the emergency room. It also led to several suicide attempts and psychiatric hospitalizations. Although there are many voices in my head, I thought that was normal. Still, I didn't think I had a mental illness. I've been in numerous psychiatric hospitals and had over, well, I guess about 30 years of therapy now. I continue to seek support and continually try to understand and cope with my illness. Now I have a support team of professionals, and I use my friends as part of my support team. My friends keep me in check and hold me accountable for my actions. Personally, I came from the bottom, but now I speak with this organization. I speak with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I'm a coordinator of In Your Own Voice for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Actually, I just gave up that title, but I was doing that for quite a while. I'm on the county mental health board. I sometimes teach adults photography. I work full-time as a supervisor for an organization that evaluates the Medi-Cal system of care throughout California. And I try to keep busy so I don't get stuck in my head. I do have a social life. I enjoy playing pool. I do that every Thursday. I do crafts, go camping, and I take a lot of pictures. Because of my limited ability to remember, photography helps me keep my memories alive. I encourage you to volunteer to be mentors, to listen to those with mental disabilities and make a difference in their life. A smile and a friendly hello can mean everything to someone who is struggling, and ignoring the mentally ill will not make things any better. If you know someone who's extremely shy or antisocial or self-injuring like I was, please find them support. In the past, the subject of mental illness was surrounded with mystery and fear. But now we have tremendous progress in understanding in mental illness and have very effective treatments. So now, after hearing about me, can you tell what my diagnosis is? Who wants to take a guess at what my diagnosis is? No, you can't. You can't tell because mental illness is a hidden disability. My disability is dissociative identity disorder, DID, or multiple personality disorder with chronic depression and seasonal affective disorder, which is also another type of depression. Thanks for listening to me today and not judging me. And I hope my story inspires you to get more involved with mental illness and mental health. And remember these few things when I close today, that 1, mental illness is a biological brain disorder, a chemical imbalance, no one's fault, can't be wished away or prayed away, and it can be genetic. Both of my sisters took their own lives over mental illness, and mental illnesses are medical illnesses, like Mari was saying. please support one another in the community, no matter what ethnicity, culture, or anything that you may come from. Thank you very much. Mari?
Laura, well done. Thank you. All the things I was going to highlight, you summarized. So you kind of took the words right out of my mouth. Are there any comments or questions that anyone might have for Laura? I love that you shared about, with the trauma, because people don't realize really that's your brain trying to figure out a new way to survive past the trauma, right? So your brain literally is rewiring itself,
Right.
to continue. The brain's amazing in that regard, but it does have its the challenges, like with the memory loss. I know some of that came from the treatment, but it can also come from the trauma itself.
Yes.
So what best helps you right now? I know that support is really big for you as well. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, having support, having some counseling, and just hanging out with friends and having a social life, and being around others really helps a lot. When I get real depressed, I tend to isolate and be by myself. And unfortunately for DID, or dissociative identity disorder, there isn't a medication that's going to help me with that. And so the medication that I do take helps with my depression and seasonal affective disorder. I also use lights that give me vitamin D and things like that. But I think the best thing is just for me, is to keep a schedule. I get up at the same time each day. I work out in the morning for a half hour to an hour with a friend. And then we visit for a little while, and I get going on my day, and I have that as my social time every day. And I just need that time to have breaks.
Awesome, thank you. And what Laura means by keeping a schedule and getting up at the same time every day, that might be between 3 and 4 a.m. that she,
4:30, give me a break.
that she gets started. You're all on your own at that one, Laura.
Yeah.
But it's also good that you mentioned about people don't often realize. I know from the therapeutic side, we talk about isolation, right? Quite a bit. Isolation is one of the a sign for many disorders, but isolation itself is traumatic. You have those people that are introverted. Introverted doesn't necessarily mean alone, but people that are really living like a lonely life or very isolated life can also have trauma symptoms and like depression and anxiety. So thank you for sharing about that too. If there are questions, we can put those in the chat for Laura or Abby. And we are going to go to Echosasis, who's going to share his story. Or not. Oh.
It's not showing me for some reason.
It's not showing. Yeah.
Oh, there
There
we
you go.
Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Echosasis, pronouns he, him, and I'm going to share about what life is like for me to live with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Also let you know a little bit more about what that is, how that's different from post-traumatic stress disorder. And the hope of sharing this is really just to get like insight just like what life is like for somebody who lives with that. So one of the differences between post-traumatic stress disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder is PTSD can occur from like one exposure to a traumatic event. So like maybe a bank robbery, maybe if somebody was just in the bank at the time and there was a robbery, and even if they were not injured, if there was like a gun that went off, maybe a few weeks, a few months, a couple years on down the line, they hear a car backfiring. that sound might bring them back. They might have the same physical sensations, the same kind of fear that was happening at the time of the bank robbery, even though that person knows a bank is not getting robbed and that they are relatively safe compared to back then. It's like just not being able to help it, but just experiencing that again. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder occurs from someone who is repeatedly exposed to traumatic events. And so for me, that trauma arose from my childhood. I'm not going to go into like too much detail about what happened to me, and it's not so much that I feel uncomfortable sharing it, but just to kind of respect what whatever you have going on the rest of the day, because it can be super heavy to hear details like that. But I will say that it was pretty severe. I have a brother who didn't live to see his 12th birthday, and I choose to be estranged from my family. It's just way more drama-free like that for me. Holidays like family type of holidays like Mother's Day, Father's Day, even Christmas can be really difficult for me. A little bit, I don't know if a little bit is really the right word. Some of it because of I don't get to have that same experience as some other people, but also just the celebrating going on around me reminds me of what I don't get to experience for myself. And so sometimes somebody just like asking me like, what am I going to be doing with my mom for Mother's Day? I mean, that can be unintentionally like super triggering for me. One of the other differences between CPTSD and PTSD is there are a few other just like the word complex, it's a little bit more complex. There's also can be feelings of feeling like damaged, worthless, a lack of sense of self, difficulty regulating emotions, and feeling like completely different from other people. And that is totally me to a T. So one of the part of my trauma is I experienced trauma perpetrated by groups of people that I didn't know. And back when that happened, I was expected to, for lack of a better word, socialize with them. I wasn't really socializing. So now in my adulthood, if I am invited to like a friend's wedding, I would love to go help that person celebrate an important time in their life. And I am so glad to like be invited or considered to help them celebrate. But because that situation is me being in a group of, I will probably know some people at the wedding, I won't know everybody, is so scary for me. And I'm in my early 40s, and I know that that's not the same situation that I was put in my childhood, but it's almost like I can't help it. And there have been a couple people who have gotten upset at me, like, why can't you just come? It's just for a couple hours. Like, well, I wish I could just snap my fingers and be a different person for a couple hours, but I just really can't help it. Another example, I was I was away. I was like about it wasn't in Illinois, but I was pretty close to where I could drive to Chicago and be there in like 3 hours. So I did. I'd never been to Chicago, and there was something there I really wanted to attend, a big kind of social gathering. And I went through the trouble of finding parking. I went up to the front door and I could not go inside. And I had spent all that time and I felt so much shame for myself. And so there's this part of me that I've been through like close to maybe 20 years of therapy. So there's this part of me, like I know I've talked it out with someone a few times um, about the shame that's attached to it. It's like not my fault, things like that. But it's still there. But going to therapy has really helped me learn some tools, but although I'm not always lucky to practice them at the time that they might be the most helpful, what I've gotten most out of therapy is like really understanding and knowing myself, because part of my childhood was a lot of putting other people first and not really knowing. So, and so I didn't really understand myself. at all. So being with a therapist and getting some really good like reflecting and mirroring really helped me understand the person that I am. Another part of like lack of self-worth, it really affects relationships, and it affects the fact for me to even have a relationship, because all kinds of things pop up inside me that need to be fulfilled, really unreasonable require for my friends. Like my friends can just be who they are and I'll accept them. But in a relationship, and it's very much connected to like a sense of me. I have to be important. I have to feel, because then I will connect it to like, oh, so I'm not important to you. So I'm just not important. I'm worthless. And that's a big thing that I need to work on for myself, but also fairness, whoever I might date. That's a lot to put somebody through. And yeah, so I really recommend therapy. And if there's anybody that kind of comes to you, talks to you about similar experiences, there's something that I was taught in when I was a counselor called the writing reflex, which is this like just want to fix it. Because we care about the person so much. We just want the best for them. But sometimes being the best for somebody is just to sit there and listen. And I feel like just being listened to, that's been like very helpful for me, very validating. So if somebody's saying stuff that seems really heavy, if you don't know what to say, that might be a blessing. You don't have to say anything. Maybe just thank you for telling me. I'm so glad you shared that with me when it can be sometimes so difficult to do so. And just that can be enough. So that's it. So in closing, that's what life is kind of like for me as an adult. Oh, and I wanted to share really quickly. I sometimes come up with words of encouragement and inspiration, just like when I'm out and about or just at home, and I will write them down on pieces of paper, and I'll keep them in my pocket so that if I'm feeling like really triggered, if I'm lucky to remember, I will pull one out and then read that. And I really like about that, that's like encouragement coming from me, from my past to my future self. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Echosasis. I love all the self-reflection. You're constantly, I mean, just in your daily, everyday life, talking about, okay, does this work for me? Does it not work for me? And, kind of trying to figure those little nuances out. But what do you say to that person that's listening? It's like 20 years of therapy. Like, I know Laura mentioned it too, and Abby, I don't know how long it's been. But what do you say to the person that's thinking 20 years, time investment, money, where do you think you would be if you hadn't done this 20 years of therapy?
I would be a lot more unfamiliar with the idea of empathy versus sympathy. I would not practice putting myself in other people's shoes and trying to see things from their perspective, which is what empathy is. And I probably would be a lot more likely to go to frustration than I would go to understanding myself and sometimes feeling like compassion for myself. So life's a lot easier with a lot of therapy, with the right therapist.
Right therapist, keyword, right? Abby or Laura, where would you all be without the therapy and treatment and everything that you've gone through?
Well, for me, I need therapy, and I know one day I'm supposed to graduate out of therapy, but I'm not looking forward to that day. Therapy for me keeps me level and able to function in society. Otherwise, I just regress into my own little world, and I need that. I need that talk to someone that gets it and understands it and is not feeling like she has to fix it for me, but helps me through it. Friends, you tell them some of the things and they're either traumatized or want to fix you in some way, and that's not what you need. So for me, it's very useful.
Thank you. Abby, did you have anything to add?
For me, uh, I intellectualize all of my feelings and issues, and without therapy, I would not be able to uh, actually feel them and process them, as uncomfortable as they might be. And that has helped me uh, c- come around and really have a better life. And my feelings are no longer as overwhelming. And that includes happy ones as well as sad and scary ones.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. There is a question in the chat, and it's actually something that I wrote down. I wrote down PCP. So primary care physician. How did you know to reach out to a therapist? Was it prompted from a doctor or family? Where does your primary care physician fit into all of this for all three of you? Abby, you want to go first?
Sure. So I knew when I first went to a therapist, I knew I had a mental health concern, and I needed to do all of that strange administrative stuff of looking up what kind of coverage I have, which I like to tell people, if you do have someone who can do that stuff for you, that's definitely a blessing. Um, and another, as far as my PCP is concerned, recently, several years ago, actually, I was experiencing depression, and I like to say that I sort of tricked myself into getting therapy. I went to my primary care doctor for a specific issue that wasn't mental health related, and he kind of got what I was talking about and said, I think I'm going to refer you to a therapist. And this is coming after years of therapy already, of knowing that I can speak up for myself, but it was a new sort of experience in terms of depression and the ways in which I was unwilling to get help, but I eventually did.
Thank you. Laura?
I was just going to say, just remember when you do go to therapy, the therapist is working for you. So, you know, interview them, make sure they're the right fit for you, make sure you're going to work well with them. Don't stick with somebody that's not a good, combative, that doesn't complement you and help you. You're paying this person for their service. And so make sure they work out for you the way that you need.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes for your primary care physician as well. A lot of people, we sign up, we get our insurance, we go, and then we kind of think, oh, I'm just, it was fine. I didn't really connect with this person, but, I got the medication, I got this, but you actually really need somebody that's going to be on your side and really hearing you. And the same thing definitely for your therapist. Most people go through at least 2 or 3 therapists before they actually meet someone who's really compatible. And I know that EchoSay says you shared that for you, it was finally getting the health insurance that covered therapy, which is relatively new in the last, 10, 15, 20 years of, again, mental health being covered by insurance. So, thank you all three of you for being here today and for sharing your stories. I do want to share my screen one last time. Your role, if someone confides in you, just to be a safe space. Listen, I think you heard that from all three of our speakers. Listen and be supportive. If there's someone you're concerned about, start a conversation. Have empathy and compassion. Again, really emphasized by our speakers. And it was really instrumental in them all healing and getting to the place where they could heal. Be non-judgmental, don't criticize or minimize. You may not understand what someone's going through, and that's okay that you don't understand. Be a bridge, encourage them to take action and then to get help. And remember, it's not your responsibility to make someone feel better or to solve their problems. I think Abby and Laura and EcoSasis all mentioned that, but you can just be a good support person. And then resources, utilize those EAP. So many times people say, well, I don't know who to reach out to, where to start. EAP is designed specifically for this. Reach out, you can get started, you can spread them out over the course of the year, and then it starts all over the following year. Your primary care physician is another good place if you need to get a referral. Consumer operated warm line, that's where there are consumers, people that are living with mental illness, who answer the calls there. Suicide prevention, if you need to, you can also dial 988 to reach the National Suicide Prevention Line. And then stopstigmasacramento.org has lots of resources. So thank you. If you have time, scan the QR code. We would love to get your feedback. Again, our speakers today were Abby, Laura, and EcoSasis. And thank you again for having us, Justin and Jessica.
Thank you guys so much for being here. This was an awesome way to round out Mental Health Awareness Month. Marielle, Laura, Abby, EcoSasis, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your insight into this. We've put the EAP info for the department and for most civil servants with the state, because I know there are other people from other agencies here in the chat. This recording will also be uploaded to the DAC website probably before the end of the day, fingers crossed. So feel free to share this with folks that weren't able to make it today or that you think would benefit from the conversation had today. So thank you all for being here. For those of you who are here from other agencies or just from CDFA, we are heading into Pride Month in June, and we've got a lot of exciting stuff scheduled for Pride. So keep an eye out for emails from my office inviting you guys to join us to celebrate Pride. Again, Stop Stigma Sacramento. Thank you, Marielle, Laura, Abby, EcoSasis. Thank you guys so much for being here. This was excellent.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Have a good day, everybody.